Hi, everyone. Uh, it's Erica Hines, February 26th. And I am excited to be here. I am here representing my company, Black Women Thriving, where we help organizations create better conditions so that their employees, especially Black women, can thrive. And we do these sessions, these lives every other month to sort of dig into some of the organizational and leadership issues that we see are playing out and to offer our perspective. Um, Maybe also to like reframe what's happening for folks, maybe to give you like words to describe it, as well as to talk about what are some of the solutions that we're trying out with organizations that we work with, and maybe we can help you in these situations as well. So, our frequency for doing these is we're taking a step back from doing them every month. Last year we did them every month, and this year we're going to do them every other month. So it is every other month because we're sitting in February. We did not do one in January. So, and I want to spend some time talking today. It'll probably be about 20 minutes, try to keep this short. But today I want to spend some time talking about uh, what I call, what we titled this is choosing endurance isn't the only option. And um, I want to talk about what that means. And I want to put it in a particular context, which is inside of your organizations, on your teams and your departments, maybe inside of your whole organization. But I want to talk about why I think that 2025, and we are sitting in February, 2 months ago, if we even take a moment to look back into 2025 and even extending into 2026, why what I'm seeing is that organizations are still leaning into having their folks approach doing work and being productive as an endurance race. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. I do have some notes, so I will be using those. Um, you know, as I just said, what really inspired this conversation, and the reason that I thought about actually even this as a topic, really came to me at the end of December, when I was paying attention, on LinkedIn Live, IG, whatever. I'm chronically online anyways. And a lot of what I heard from folks at work towards the end of the year, December last year, is that they were like, "Oh my gosh, why are we continuing to have meetings? Why am I putting together a deliverable on December 23rd, knowing no one's going to look at it until January 1st?" Um, and I heard that repeatedly. I saw that. I saw comments like that repeatedly, status updates like that repeatedly from folks saying, like, it doesn't feel like people are winding down. It just feels like they're like, all right, we're going to continue up to the end of the year and pick it back up in January. And then January happened. And what I saw, again, I'm online. And so I like read people's comments, pay attention to the news. And the comments that I heard in January a lot were, um, you know, this does not feel like a new year. What it feels like at work is just a continuation of last year. Um, and if you took that at face value, like, it's work, of course, it's like a continuation of last year. But I think what people really meant was like, it was that they weren't showing up feeling refreshed. They didn't show up. They're not showing up to the new year feeling like new year, new me. Um, I think if they were feeling anything, they were like, new year, same thing. I'm trying not to curse, so, you know, interject whatever word you want to in there. And so I just feel like people didn't show up to this year and are continuing as we are about to go into the last month of Q1. Not necessarily, not that people are showing up feeling as though they are continuing to trudge through the endurance of showing up at work every day, doing their job and getting their paycheck. and people's like energy, feelings about work, trust in the workplace, um, is dragging as much as I think that it was, that it was dragging last year. So I think when we if any of this sort of feels like what you have either yourself been experiencing or what you have seen members of your team experiencing, I want you to know that you're not alone. I mean, that's the reason that I'm bringing this up is that I part of my job is to pay attention to what's happening and figure out if it's like a trend or something that can be addressed. And what I am saying to you is that people feel depleted. They don't feel like they're revitalized. And while it is not an employer's job to necessarily make sure that their employees, um, feel completely revitalized every day, it is their job to not continue to create conditions where people feel depleted. Um, and I think that a lot of organizations, if we talk about it honestly, um, what has happened in a lot of organizations is something that I have been calling like an over-indexing on individual resilience. So if I were to think about 2025, even going into 2026, if we're going to be really direct about what's happening, is that you as a leader, your managers, your teams, all of you have been asked to tap into your resilience in a way, and for, not in a way, for a long time and to a degree that you know isn't sustainable. And maybe the wear and tear of that are starting to show. It's asked people to endure. Um, and a lot of organizations either, as we're sitting here at the end of February, either haven't taken the time, don't feel like they have the time, or don't feel a sense of urgency to raise their heads up and figure out if there's a different way to approach what's happening. Well, that's the job of the business that I have, which is to take what it is that I've just named and see if there's something that can be done about it. So that's the conversation that I'm going to briefly have with you today. Um, as I mentioned, I said that I think a lot of people, I think a lot of organizations and teams feel a sense of depletion, feel as though they've been over-indexed on resilience. But I want to like make this even clearer to you, and I want to sort of put it to you in terms of thinking about teams. So I want to give you an example of how this is showing up on teams. And the way that this is showing up is that there's three ways that this is showing up. One is that you may be seeing on your teams that your teams just sort of feel like full, like there's nothing else that they can cognitively handle having to do. And that may be a combination of like too much work on their plate because of reduced staffs. It could be them feeling full because they've gone through like a number of change efforts and disruption last year, restructuring, rollbacks, budget cuts, leadership changes, job huggings, layoffs. People just feel full. Like there's no space up here in the brain to offer any more to the job other than what they can give on a daily basis, right? And for some of you and your teams, like that may be that feeling that may be like I'm trying to say here. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say like that feeling of feeling full may mean that you are just getting the work that you get, right? There may be nothing new, nothing creative, nothing innovative coming out of your teams. What you're getting is what people can give you. And I'm speaking particularly to the leaders and managers. The tools that you have in front of you to help in these situations, which is like, how can we make sure that we're providing good feedback, or how can we motivate our team? Like, those just aren't working because people are like, that I'm up to here. There's no amount of motivation that you can bring that is going to make me work even harder. I can't do it. And that isn't a feedback thing. That's not a motivation thing. That's actually a capacity problem, right? It's a capacity. People are at capacity. I think the second pattern that's showing up in terms of people feeling depleted and feeling as though they've had to rely on their resilience is that your team has just gone quiet. And what that means is, like, this one can particularly catch leaders off guard because, ideally as a manager and leader, you're like, oh, having a silent team means that people are just putting their heads down and getting their work done. But it also means that people aren't raising concerns at all. They're not raising when things are broken at all. They're also not raising situations that could have been dealt with at an earlier stage. Instead, what they're doing is like, doesn't impact me. I don't need to say anything about it. I just need to keep my head down. You're not hearing questions when a decision gets made, um, which means that further down the line, if that decision has been made and people don't understand it, and they either don't adhere to it or something happens, you sort of lost the opportunity to have that sense of transparency. Um, the reason that people aren't doing that is partially because they don't care, but it's partially because trust is eroded. I think that when folks are feeling as though they're in this state of endurance, nothing has changed, like I've said, over resilience, depletion, um, and not seeing that those conditions have changed, um, it really impacts their ability to trust you as a leader that they will get the support that they need. Um, because, you know, it, I think for a lot of folks who are working today, and you as leaders, like, something is off, and the fact that it's not sort of being addressed, really kind of, yeah, it impacts people's trust of you. So I think that's a second way to be thoughtful of what's showing up. And I think the third pattern that I want to hit on, which I probably hit on in every single time I do a LinkedIn Live, which is that people are performing and that they're exhausted. I think that's how I started out in terms of talking about 2025 and 2026. People feeling as though they did not get a break. People feeling as though the situations that we found ourselves in at work, um, aren't being fixed, aren't being prioritized. And people who felt tired last year are feeling tired this year. And I'm just going to say it, that when people continue to feel tired and they sort of have like compounding situations or compounding environment where, like, they're never allowed, or there is a space for them to take a break, that's how burnout occurs. That's how burnout occurs. And so in thinking about, like, this, the what I've just named, what I think is really important for organizations to start to think about, I think I've just named a pretty, like, depressing situation that workplaces find themselves in. But I would rather name what's happening in workplaces and say, like, hey, this isn't great, and then try and figure out how to fix it, than to ignore it or deprioritize it. Um, and in raising it up and talking about it, the goal here is to say the thing and put it out, say the thing out loud. So that's what I'm here to do. In I think the final piece of this in terms of like laying out what's happening and what it looks like in teams, I want to end by talking to you about the cost because um, what I have seen a lot in my work in Black Women Thriving is that um, what's really like while it's important to name sort of the conditions in which people are working in and asking, suggesting that we can improve it, I am aware that we have to put it into what it costs organizations when this happens. And so I want to talk about, the cost of endurance. And also, I want to place squarely a question that I think is not being answered currently about what we're going to do about this. So, the cost of all of this happening is that more and more people feel pretty cynical and pretty pessimistic about what it is that their workplace can do for them. I think on the flip side of that, people have become very cynical and withdrawn in terms of what it is that they're willing to do for the organizations that they work in. And when I think about that, what I think about is this idea that uh, folks are feeling as though they're cogs in the wheel. And while this has perhaps always been the way that the workplace has operated, I think there used to be at least a thin veil of caring about the state of employees, their well-being, and how that impacts their productivity. And I think that over the course of the last 4 to 5 years through any number of situations, maybe post-pandemic, maybe the rise of AI, that thin veil has gone away. And the sort of people feeling as though they are cog in the machine has gone up. And if that's the new sort of equation in which we find ourselves at work, there's a part of me that says, like, well, let's at least be clear about that. But if there are organizations and teams and companies where they do feel that they are sort of sliding into the sort of making people feel as though they're cogs in the machine, running people's endurance, and and seeing it as like, well, okay, that's fine, that person goes, we'll replace them, which is true of the nature of work, but maybe does not have to be quite so like the word prevalent comes to mind. For those companies that want to operate, but also still have a sense of wanting to do so from a place of not over relying on resilience and over indexing on resilience and over relying on people's endurance. I think that there is a place and ways for you to work differently. And I think that as you think about what it is that you can do, I want to leave you with the idea of what you need to start thinking about right now. What you need to do is think about whether or not you feel like this is urgent enough to intervene, whether or not you feel as though you need to interrupt the conditions that I've just laid out, and whether you see the fact or whether you see the benefits of doing so. I, of course, think that there are benefits. I think that there's a reason to do it. And I can see how it will help your business overall. But I do think that if there is even a breath that organizations can take right now, I think it is to figure out, do you want to intervene in these conditions that are continuing to go on? I will say that Black Women Thriving has been building ways to do so that we're going to be rolling out over the next several months to help you do that. But first, you have to decide if it's something that you want to do, and if it's something that you think and believe, as I do, is not just the responsibility of the employees to deal with, but ultimately is the responsibility of you as a leader and an organization. Thank you for your time. I'll talk to you in another few months.